Welcome back to another edition of Racing Rundown here on YouTube. I'm Eric DeCoster. In this Kentucky Derby contender profile, we'll be taking a look at Rocket Can, Bill Mott's representative in this year's Kentucky Derby, a colt with plenty of potential. He just has not seen it all through yet. He's 2 for 7 lifetime with a pair of seconds to go along with it. This colt won the Grade 3 Holy Bull Stakes back in February before running, I'd say evenly is probably the best way to describe his final two preps for this year's Kentucky Derby, but a nice horse nonetheless. But like I said, there is a little bit lacking in this horse's running lines that we need to see more of if he's going to become a Kentucky Derby contender. That being said, I'm going to give you one reason he might just take that step forward in the Kentucky Derby, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. This colt, like I mentioned, few good wins in his career, some really good efforts underneath, and that's really where it all starts. He's been competitive in every stakes race he's run, really every race since stretching out to 2 turns. He made 2 starts going 7/8 at Saratoga over the summer. They didn't go well. He just was never involved in those. But after about just under 2 months off, he went down to Churchill, took a pair of, did a pair of starts there in the fall, going a mile and 16th. He broke his maiden there. He followed it up with a really good second in an allowance to confidence game, in which Hit Show, who's also in this Kentucky Derby, ran 4th, so a key allowance race there on that November 26th card there. And then the 3 starts at 3 have been very good runs. Won the Grade 3 Holy Bull. It was a pretty weak field. I think you have to acknowledge that. He was up against no other Derby runners, so that's already something that he was able to overcome there. And then he followed it up with a good second behind Forte in the Fountain of Youth. He stalked his slow pace in there, made the move when it mattered, and then just was unable to hold off Forte when the going got good. But nevertheless, it was a run that you had to really respect, and that led to him being favored in his next start, the Arkansas Derby. Now, he took the trip out to Arkansas because his owner, Frank Fletcher, is from the Hot Springs area. Arkansas native. I believe he's owned businesses in that area too. So obviously someone who has spent a lot of time and wants to win a race of that stature, and goes off favorite there. Rocket Can does. Sets a good trip. Maybe gets caught a little wide at times, but all things considered, he didn't really punch home. And while he stayed competitive, Angel of Empire won that by 4 1/4 lengths. Rocky Can was only beaten 4 3/4, so even though he was 4th, he was a half length off of 2nd. And he still was sticking it in there with Reincarnate and King Russell and a few other runners late. It still lacked the punch you need. And obviously, not only to lose as the favorite, but to lose as the favorite without any excuses is probably the worst thing you can do in your final Kentucky Derby prep. I think, though, back to one horse named Mandaloon, who kind of flipped the script on that. Brad Cox tried for weeks and weeks to give an excuse as to why his horse ran poorly in the Kentucky Derby, and he wasn't able to come up with anything. Bill Mott said he was a little wide, and he thought that probably compromised him, so we can't go to that theory entirely, but nevertheless, I don't think that's what hurt him at the end of the day. I think if he was good enough to win the Arkansas Derby, he could have overcame how wide he was. Just felt like he was a couple low there, a couple low in the Fountain of Youth, and that's concerning. And then you look at, he's been beaten by so many different Derby starters throughout his career, going back to his very first start when he was 5th to Disarm, when Disarm broke his maiden. Then you go further down, we already mentioned the confidence game race, and then, of course, Forte, and then last time out, Angel of Empire and Reincarnate. So 5 runners there alone that he's had no excuses when losing to. Maybe lack of experience on debut, sure. So we'll cross the Disarm out one, but then 4, I'd say, more serious contenders in confidence game, Forte, Angel of Empire, and maybe Reincarnate, certainly don't look great on him. I think that's a bit concerning that he's failed to overcome those horses. And finally, our last con I have listed here, and really the last one I could think of in general, he has not shown any improvement from a figure perspective, if that's your kind of thing. Now, when you look at the numbers on Bayer, the ones we have on our screen, he threw a 78 when he broke his maiden, improved that to an 82 when he was 2nd in the allowance, another 82 when he won the Holy Bull, and then a little jump in the Fountain of Youth behind Forte, and then he regressed 5 points in the Arkansas Derby. That's concerning once again, because there's not a trip excuse that you can really find other than being a little wide. Once again, we'll throw that out there, but if that's your only excuse and you still regress that much and you still haven't progressed more than 8 points from your maiden breaking score, that's concerning. The lack of jump there kind of emphasizes the overall cut below, lack of a true pow to him. There's a million ways you could describe it. However you describe it, he is missing a little something. And I think that that's kind of consistent across the board too. You look at the Brisnet numbers, 96 speed figure from them when he broke his maiden. He threw a 96 in the Arkansas Derby. So to them, he's shown no improvement. He threw a 98 in the Fountain of Youth, so 2-point improvement. But all in all, he's been hanging in that mid 90s range. Now, I don't think that really means he peaked too early. I just think he hasn't gotten any better from last October to this point. But you know what? He's been competitive in every race. And there's two factors that I think could maybe move him forward in the Kentucky Derby. One kind of obvious one, and then one that you've been following the news and you've been watching this horse's workouts. Seemed like something that could move him up. So we'll start with the pedigree. He's by Into Mischief. Of course, Into Mischief has defeated the notion that he's a sprinter. Only throws sprinters too, because he threw a pair of Kentucky Derby winners in 2020 and 2021 with Authentic and Mandaloon. Took a break last year, of course, but this year comes in with Rocket Can, who looks like a big route type. If you just physically, he's a big imposing colt with a huge stride on him. And the dam side really sucks that through because he looks more like his dam sire, Tappet, big bounding gray, and fits that mold to a T. So plenty of stamina in the pedigree, and he's showing that with every run. He kind of just grinds away his races. So that's the indication of a horse that wants to go longer. I could even see him, once again, as weird as it is to say, being a son of Into Mischief, but see him being a good Belmont horse in the future. But so that's one way that I think we could see some potential improvement from this colt. The other one, and an even bigger one, though, is the addition of blinkers that is going to be coming in the Kentucky Derby. He's never been equipped with them, but I mentioned so much that he lacks that punch. When the going gets good, he does not go through the gears. He seems to stay on the same top one once he reaches it in the stretch. But the blinkers could potentially remedy that. Bill Mott was saying in an interview, and it was something I noticed when I watched his first workout with the blinkers on after the Arkansas Derby loss. I was saying, wow, this horse just seems like he needed a little bit more to him to fully wake him up. It didn't seem like he was ever giving his all. It felt like he had more to give after each and every one of his races. And that's what Bill Mott was saying. And if you watch his workouts, he seems like a more focused horse when you compare them to the workouts pre-Arkansas Derby and well throughout his career. If the videos that you can find, it's very telling to me that this horse has not shown that he has improved this much in the mornings alone. I usually read very little into the morning workouts on Derby week. If you ask anybody that's close to me, they know that it's pretty much my least favorite thing about the lead up to the Derby. I enjoy seeing the horses because I'm a fan of them before anything, but I don't ever glean anything from them. But Rocket Can, I had to, because the blinkers clearly made him look like a completely different racehorse. And not many people are taking notice of it. I think they should, though, because the workout times reflect it. And when you just watch him visually, he feels like a more focused, determined animal with an extra gear or two that he's willing to go to because the blinkers are on. So that's something I will consider in the lead up to the Kentucky Derby. Now, will that move him up enough to win the race? I don't know, but I think it could take him to being a finished 12th player to maybe filling out in the exotics. Something like that I feel like is where his money could really be made this year, because I do think he will improve with the addition of blinkers. I just don't know if it's enough to win the Kentucky Derby. And on paper alone, I think there's a clear lack of substance to elevate him to being a Kentucky Derby winner. But the blinkers being on will absolutely put him front and center in my mind as being a horse to consider. And I would suggest doing your own research, watching the race yourself, or the workouts yourself, and seeing if you think there's a difference as well. So I can't bake much on the paper. I think on paper, he does look like he is a touch below the better contenders in this year's Kentucky Derby. But I think if the blinkers go on, I think it's anybody's game in general in this Derby. And I think that most people need to take that into heavy consideration. Don't just look at it as ink on a paper. Think if that will actually move this horse up in your mind leading into the race. He'll move up for me. I just don't know how much yet. So I hope that's informative. I hope that's helpful. I hope you're able to glean a little bit something in this profile on Rocket Can, who's certainly going to be one of the outsiders in this year's Kentucky Derby, but a horse that does have some intriguing qualities. That's all I have for you. We'll see you next time here on Racing Rundown.